Hey everyone, and welcome. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. Today, we're diving into a story with incredibly high stakes. I want you to imagine, just for a second, being locked in a jail cell, staring down a severe criminal charge. Most of us, we'd probably panic. We'd hire a lawyer and rely entirely on standard legal arguments. But Dr. Chen Jingyuan? He did something totally unprecedented. He used hard academic science, specifically health psychology, computer science, and quantum-level physics, to completely dismantle the state's case against him. It's an absolutely brilliant, rigorously structured fight for freedom, and we're going to break down exactly how he pulled it off.
Okay, let's dive into this. Right from his confinement, Dr. Chen hand-wrote a massive 20,000-word defense. He called it his blood letter. And in it, he stated his goal was leaving a historical record for the future rather than catering to the court. Think about that shift. Instead of pleading for mercy or giving into panic, he went through what psychologists call meaning-making. He realized this wasn't just about winning a court case anymore. It was about exposing a massive systemic flaw so that future generations could study it.
And that right there brings us to the core intellectual mystery we're unpacking today. How exactly do you use complex physics and behavioral psychology to beat a legal charge? What we're about to see is a fascinating, high-stakes clash. On one side, you have an individual armed with scientific logic and complex systems theory, and on the other, you've got a judicial institution built on incredibly rigid, linear, centuries-old laws. Act 1. The Psychology of Extreme Stress. To really understand his defense, we first have to understand his mind. You see, the high-pressure environment of a criminal prosecution is practically designed to test human sanity. If we look at Richard Lazarus's highly regarded stress appraisal theory, environments exactly like the one Dr. Chen was in create massive, crushing psychological burdens. Look at these specific stressors. He's facing completely unpredictable outcomes, he has an absolute loss of control over the legal process, and on top of that, he's dealing with a severe identity threat. His whole life he's been a rational scholar, and now the state is forcibly redefining him as a criminal. Throw in extreme social isolation, and these factors will almost always trigger chronic stress and severe psychological breakdown. So, how in the world did he survive it? Well, he utilized a coping mechanism recognized in health psychology known as meaning-focused coping. Dr. Chen essentially forged his intellect into a psychological shield. By shifting his primary goal from just getting acquitted to documenting a structural flaw for history, he took his power back. He regained his sense of control. His suffering wasn't just random punishment anymore, it was data. It became an academic project. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast we're looking at. On the left, you've got Dr. Chen deploying these brilliant psychological coping mechanisms, using cognitive reappraisal and complex systems thinking to stay completely grounded. But on the right, you have the judicial institution itself. Health psychology actually shows us that institutional actors under pressure suffer from high cognitive load. To deal with complex scientific arguments, the system naturally defaults to heuristic simplification, which is basically just taking mental shortcuts, and risk amplification, where they just assume the absolute worst-case scenario. It is a total, fundamental mismatch in cognitive processing. Act 2. The Computer Science Shield. Let's look at how he dismantled the actual charges. Once he secured his own psychological foundation, Dr. Chen went on the offensive. Here is the exact charge the state leveled against him, causing serious confusion of public order. His crime? Forwarding posts on social media. Seriously. The prosecution argued that his online actions directly caused systemic chaos in society. But Dr. Chen didn't get bogged down arguing about the content of the posts. Instead, he pulled out computer science to prove that the charge itself was technically impossible. He introduced the court to the CAP theorem. This was introduced by computer scientist Eric Brewer back in the year 2000, and it's a foundational principle of distributed systems, which, by the way, includes literally all modern social media networks. It states that any distributed network cannot simultaneously guarantee three specific things. So the crucial point is right here. Consistency means everyone sees the exact same thing at the same time. Availability means the system is always online and responding. And partition tolerance means it survives even when the network drops out. Because massive global social networks absolutely must have availability and partition tolerance just to function. They logically, mathematically cannot have perfect consistency. Perfect order is literally impossible by design. This led to just a devastatingly logical summary in his defense. He basically said, chaos or confusion isn't a crime happening on the internet. It's physically built into the architecture of the internet. Therefore, it is a categorical error to legally blame an individual user for a network's inherent lack of order. The confusion was already there. It's a feature, not a bug. Act 3, the physics shield network robustness, because Dr. Chen definitely didn't stop at computer science. To completely obliterate the legal concept of causality here, he deployed his physics shield. He pointed out that social networks, places like Twitter, Facebook, Weibo, they all operate as scale-free networks. These are complex systems governed by a power law distribution. In plain English, that means the network isn't equal. A tiny minority of accounts hold massive, multi-million follower connections, while the vast majority of users have almost zero connections at all. Think about it using a micro to macro metaphor. Over on the left, you've got your hub nodes. These are your massive influencers. On the right are your peripheral nodes. Dr. Chen, he had less than 100 followers. He was the definition of a peripheral node. Accusing his tiny little account of causing massive public disorder is like accusing a single drop of water of causing a tsunami and a chaotic ocean. Structurally, the math just doesn't work that way. And to back this up, he brought in Cohen's critical threshold formula from physics. This is a mathematical proof showing that scale-free networks are unbelievably robust against random fluctuations. A peripheral node's actions literally just disappear into the network's background noise. You could eliminate almost every single peripheral node and the network still wouldn't crash. It only breaks down if the massive hubs are attacked directly. And this brilliantly illustrates the final nail in the legal argument. The statistical probability of Dr. Chen's tiny account crashing the macro network or causing serious confusion, it's virtually zero. The law requires a direct chain of cause and effect. But physics mathematically proves that in a complex system like this, that chain does not and cannot exist for his actions. Act 4, a clash of paradigms. Let's bring all this together. Let's move to that and see how this builds into a massive clash of worldviews. When you synthesize the human struggle, the computer science, and the physics, you see the real problem. On the left, we have the judicial paradigm, relying on 18th century logic, assuming linear causality where A directly causes B, expecting a static mechanical order. But on the right, we have the scientific paradigm, our actual 21st century reality of nonlinear complex systems that are emergent and inherently chaotic. The law wants a simple straight line, but the digital world is a sprawling, totally unpredictable web. Dr. Chen captured this whole absurd mismatch perfectly with this devastatingly simple metaphor from his defense. He wrote, "My forwarding is like breathing out carbon dioxide. You cannot sentence me to life in prison because the earth is warming." I mean, wow. It perfectly grounds all that abstract physics back into his visceral, human fight for physical freedom. He acknowledges his tiny contribution to the system, sure, but he logically destroys the idea that he is somehow responsible for the macro-level outcome. So, what does this all mean for us? Why does this matter? Well, it matters because causality requires proof, not presumption. If our courts just ignore modern complex science and rely on outdated linear assumptions, then literally any ordinary citizen can become a scapegoat for systemic noise, all under the vague guise of disrupting order. Which leaves us with a really profound question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If our legal systems continue to rely on simplistic linear logic, how can they ever fairly judge the complex, nonlinear digital world we actually live in today? It's a foundational challenge for modern justice, and it was brought to light brilliantly by one man fighting for his freedom with the ultimate scientific defense. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and hey, keep questioning the systems around you.